So, welcome everybody. Uh, we get to do this amazing interview with Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum, MD, who, he's giving us all hope. He's offering answers, which you all know that with this thing is just incredible because it seems like there aren't answers out there, or there's a lot of conflicting, scary information.
Hmm.
So I'm Lorrie Rivers, and I'll just start with telling you a little bit about why I'm here. When I was in my 20s, I actually developed severe myalgic encephalomyelitis, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, in addition to fibromyalgia and some other weird things, which are also post-viral chronic illnesses, and they kept me housebound and bedbound for 8 years. And because of that experience, I became a holistic coach and a yoga teacher specializing in dealing with your emotions and physical relief from symptoms. And I've worked with hundreds of clients with ME, CFS, FM, and other chronic illnesses for the past 20 years to help them navigate those physical symptoms and to find relief from the emotional fallout that these illnesses bring. So when I came down with COVID, I figured that, like you probably did, that I would be done with it in 2 weeks or so. And 2 months in, I recognized that what I was feeling was very familiar. And it felt like before when I had ME, CFS, FM, in addition to some other symptoms that I'd never experienced before that I assumed are COVID specific. And because I've been through all this before, I've been dedicated to helping people with the emotional, with offering yoga and myofascial release for physical support and things like that. So move forward a few months, I specifically sought out Dr. Teitelbaum because I remembered how helpful his book, From Fatigue to Fantastic, was for me so many years ago. And I also realized how much confusion and misinformation and just hopelessness and helplessness is surrounding long COVID right now. So I reached out to him, and he so generously said yes. Um, so glad to have him here. And before I introduce Dr. Teitelbaum, just want to do some quick housekeeping. And that is that you can enter any questions that you have in the chat box. If it's something that you would prefer not to have your name attached to, you can message it to me privately, and I'll do that. And both I and Dr. Teitelbaum, we're both going to be watching the chat. So we hope we're going to grab all your questions. And if not, just know that we are getting to the main topics and to the meat of everything. Um, and we said this a little bit earlier, but Dr. Teitelbaum has some resources, some online resources for you as well that I'll put in the chat. And if you do miss them in the chat, not to worry, I'll send them in the email to you with the replay in it. And I also want to say a quick thank you to Be Yoga and Kara Truitt for letting me use the yoga studio to do this. So I am so pleased to introduce Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. He's one of the most frequently quoted integrative pain and fibromyalgia medical authorities in the world. He's the author of many best-selling books, From Fatigue to Fantastic, which I mentioned, Pain Free 123, The Fatigue and Fibromyalgia Solution, and I think 10 total. He's the lead author of 5 studies on effective treatment for fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. And he often appears as a guest on news and talk shows nationwide, including Good Morning America, The Dr. Oz Show, Oprah and Friends, CNN, and Fox News Health. So he's kind of a big deal. Uh, he's well, I feel like I'm meeting a rock star, really, because I read your book 20 years ago, and it's just incredible to meet you. So yeah, we're all just so lucky. So So hi, Dr. T. It's so wonderful to finally meet you in person. And how are you doing today?
Always fantastic. It's funny when child number five went to college. My wife Lori and I moved to Hawaii.
Wow.
As a kid, I figured everything I did on the mainland I could do from Hawaii, and I really believe we can create whatever we want. So, aloha, everybody. Here from the Big Island, we're going to teach you how to get your life back. And uh, this whole area, it's going to sound strange to hear this, but it's a lot of fun because there is a payoff that you're going to have at the end. There's this actually, you know how when Peter Parker got bit by a spider, he got superpowers. You have the things you kind of feel with everything you've been through, you should at least get a superpower out of it. You're going to. And if we have time at the end, we'll explain what that will be. It'll be easier to get. This will not have been in vain. This will have turned out to be a good thing for you once you're feeling better. While you're in the middle of it right now, it's like, what are you talking about? My life is over. You will get better. You will feel better, and you're going to learn. Well, I give you a hint. You're going to learn authenticity. You're going to learn how to say no to things you don't want to say, you don't want to do, and how to be yourself. That's one of the gifts that you can get from the disease. But we'll talk about that as time allows at the end. First, let's go ahead and talk about more the physical components.
Yeah, and I love that, Dr. T. That's exactly what I teach. And I can look back at my life and see that uh, having MECFS FM for those 8 years, even though it was very intense and I might not choose to do it again, it was one of the right. It was one of the best things that ever happened for me. It changed
Hmm.
my life. It transformed me in a positive way. So I
Like,
love that approach.
and
Love
like
it.
I said, easier to get that when you're on the other end and feeling better, right?
Right, exactly. Exactly, right? Yeah. Yeah, so first things first, what are you and the rest of the medical community calling long COVID? I feel like we don't have a
Long
specific
collars.
name for it yet. Long haulers?
I think the Atlantic coined it well, and it stuck. So, you
Okay.
know, there's well, here's the thing: most doctors have this is very similar to chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, which has
Yeah.
been around for many, many years. And most doctors, because of the complexity of the illness, it's not this thing where, okay, here's this pill, have a good day. I can ask you two questions, do one blood test, and diagnose it. This is a body or system wide process that affects many, many different parts of our control centers and such. It's quite complex. You can't treat it in the 10-minute doctor visit. So most doctors have taken the approach of, I don't know what's wrong with you, so you're crazy. They'll say it graciously. You're
Yep.
depressed. You're anxious. And they may not say it in so many words, but they'll imply it to you and your family until you feel like you want to strangle them. And they're not bad people. What they should be saying is, I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with you, as opposed to, I don't know what's wrong with you, so you are crazy. But this is a process that most people have gone through with CFS and fibromyalgia. And even the folks in the COVID long haulers community are getting the same thing. It's anxiety, must be anxious. You know that, yes, you are anxious, but that's not what's going on here. So most doctors, in terms of how they're dealing with it, kind of the old fashioned is this medical approach.
Yeah.
So in the research community, there's the usual thing. There is some very good work being done in terms of now that we're seeing this unfold live, to actually do testing early and look at the progression of immune changes because there are so many changes in the overall multiple levels of immunity and other parts of the body that this is a wonderful time to monitor that. And that's all well and good. But in the 15 to 20 years it takes them to get that, figure it out, and use it properly, it would be nice for everybody to be healthy on the sidelines going, well, that's interesting, as opposed to flat out in bed. So that's what we're gonna.
Yeah.
So they're doing what they need to do much more quickly because everything COVID is priority. Um, but again, we will give you what you need to know to get well now. So, so
Hmm.
you can watch that research unfold at its usual slow speed,
Yeah.
comfortably.
Yes, that's great. So we'll be kind of jumping around here, but let's start with what what is this? What is happening in the body? Why are people developing long COVID?
Basically, it's like tripping a circuit breaker in your home. If you have an energy crisis, basically a mismatch of energy where you're calling on more energy than you're able to make in your home, if you plug in too many space heaters on a cold New York winter, you trip a circuit breaker, you overload the circuit. And in our bodies, when they're spending more energy than they're able to make, and that can happen with any of a number of infections, literally dozens of infections can do that. It can happen from severe situational stresses. It can happen from emotional stresses. It can be from being in toxic relationships or jobs. It can be from auto accidents. It can be postpartum. Anything that drains energy, hormonal deficiencies, sleep problems, nutritional deficiencies. They're just like there's hundreds of ways to trip a circuit breaker. Uh, COVID basically what we see most often is that it's not just the virus that does it. It's not that COVID is, oh my God, so much more horrible than Q fever or any of a number of SARS or MERS that, or any of the other things that also trigger the same thing. But when people get it in the context of overall energy crisis, they're sugar addicts, they are not getting enough sleep, they have to push through. A lot of you probably found that when you got the virus, you tried to push through it, and that is a recipe for blowing a fuse. So you'll see all kind of different patterns. So you were in a stressful life situation already when the virus hit. So anything that causes more energy need than availability, you trip a circuit breaker. That circuit breaker is called the hypothalamus. It controls sleep, which is why many of you find you can't sleep, or even if you sleep, you're not rested. It controls your hormone system. So across the board, you'll see low adrenal and other issues. It controls autonomic function and temperature regulation. And then the immune system, because the low energy, also goes off whack. And that's what triggers that mix, triggers the whole process. Then you're off and running.
Okay. So are long COVID and myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, are they the same thing? Or
Yeah. Yeah, the bottom line is that no two people with fibromyalgia are the same. Each has a somewhat different pattern, but the overall umbrella is somewhere. Basically, yes. If you have fatigue, brain fog, especially if you can't sleep, that paradox of can't sleep despite being exhausted tells you you have tripped the hypothalamic circuit breaker. You have this process, and I don't care what you call it. There's dozens of names that have been given over the years. It used to be called Florence Nightingale syndrome because Florence
oh,
Nightingale had it. Dr. Nobel of Nobel Prize fame had it. John
huh.
F. Kennedy had it. So these have been called by many things over the years. I don't care what you call it. It just doesn't help it go away.
Okay. Interesting. So somebody just said in the chat, yes, I have Graves' disease, fibromyalgia, psoriatic, yes,
Psoriatic arthritis.
psoriatic, yes, yes, thank you, arthritis. My body is on high alert, just as you
Mm-hmm.
described, and that is what it feels like,
Mm-hmm. And when
definitely.
you have Graves' disease, it's kind of like I tease. That's when your thyroid is overactive. It's kind of like a country western song. You know, your dog leaves, your spouse leaves. It's like having 18 pots of
Oh,
coffee a day, and you're just on overdrive,
ah,
and everything is just and overwhelming. Um,
okay.
so learning centering techniques when you have Graves' disease, I had that myself, by the way.
Oh,
that I knew how to
interesting. Well,
that I knew how to center is what got me through it. So yes, these are the kind of stresses that, especially in concert with COVID, the COVID pushes you right over the edge.
gotcha, gotcha. Okay. So we talked about the hypothalamus. Uh, what else causes these persistent symptoms? We talked about, the post-viral CFS fibromyalgia. What about pulmonary, cardiac, neurologic injuries,
Mhm.
um, stroke, heart attack? We also had a question from one of our support groups from Pa, who says, "Is our mitochondria damaged?" So
Mhm.
that's a lot in one.
Okay, so let's take a look because we talked about the core things: tired, achy brain fog, can't sleep, and fibromyalgia. There are dozens of other symptoms. But then, what happens when you also have the um, the specific organ damage for that virus. So each of the different infections, whether it's Lyme disease, cytomegalovirus, HPV6, has its own unique kind of signature where it hits different things.
Mm.
Um, so the number one, how do I distinguish if I have shortness of breath because I have the lung scarring or lung damage or inflammation versus shortness of breath from fibromyalgia? Because breathlessness is a common symptom in fibro. And again, the more you can start defining what's going on, the less crazy making this illness will be. So invest in a simple pulse oximeter. They're little finger clip things that'll tell your oxygen percent saturation in your blood. You can get them on Amazon for 25 to $50. I go maybe for a little higher end one if you can. Some of them are kind of junky out there. Um, and it should be running at least 95% when you're just hanging out and sitting. With exercise, most people should not go down more than about 3%. You shouldn't go down under 93%. And most people will go up. So um, if your pulse ox, if you're short of breath, you stick it on, put your button, and in 30 seconds you'll have a reading. If it says 97%, you know your lungs are working, you know your heart is working, and you know you have plenty of oxygen going to your body, and that you don't have to worry about it. It's not a heart lung thing. If
Okay.
it's going down to 94, 93%, then it's more likely to be the lung. So let's start with those things. What do you do for the lung? What do you do for the heart? What do you do for the brain? Um, for the lung, the good news is that the research is showing that the pulmonary inflammation, or we could use a number of names for what's going on. I'm just being general here, but it does seem to heal up over time. They've been doing serial studies where they look and the lung function continues to improve. So that what they were thinking is a fibrotic pattern is actually resolving in people. That tends to go away. What can you do to help it go away? Again, antioxidants and especially glutathione. If you look at other pulmonary conditions, in those cases, I will go with the form that I use because form is important for glutathione. It's called clinical glutathione. I would do one or two twice a day, that specific brand. Um, I also use a multivitamin that's high in antioxidants in general. Um, in if there are those of you who have severe pulmonary fibrosis, um, where the pulmonary function testing is showing decreased function, your pulse ox is going down. In my practice, don't do this at home. I will consider colchicine orally, zero point 0.6 milligrams a day. This has been shown in other fibrotic illnesses over time to really be quite helpful. But again, 99% of people with post-COVID long hauler will not need that. And that's why when you do the pulse ox, you can realize I have more oxygen in my body than here. We have a friend put the clip on you, say, my oxygen is higher than yours. They're going to realize your lung is okay, your lungs are okay, your heart's okay on that end. You're not short of breath from that. It's just a sense of breathlessness that can be part of the fibromyalgia. Then you don't have to worry about it. Then, oh, okay, good. In terms of the brain fog, most of the brain fog is not coming from encephalitis or brain injury and all of that. It's coming from the fibromyalgia. And you'll recognize it because you'll have difficulty with word finding, word substitution, and short term memory. That's brain fog from fibro, and it's very, very different than encephalomyelitic kind of stuff. But you will find that those of you who did have brain involvement, now I'm not talking about those who had strokes, overt strokes. That's a very different process. Most of you did not have that. And for those who did, that's a separate conversation. And there are things you can do to help as well. But um, for what most of you will find is that the most of brain fog is a fibro, but there is something called microglial activation. That the virus, there are these cells in the brain called microglial cells. You can think of them as these good-natured farmers, chewing on a hayseed, going and fertilizing the brain cells, kind of taking care of them, tending them, and then suddenly there's a weed, and they go from the mild-mannered farmers to kill the weeds, and they're going pulling everything out. Viral infections cause that shift where they start attacking because they see a perceived threat there, and uh, they have trouble cooling off after
Mm.
mellowing down. So
Okay.
there are several things you can do to settle them down and go back into their mild manner. Feed the the brain cells for the microglial activation. Low dose naltrexone, it's a prescription medication. It's actually used to block the effect of morphine, so people on narcotics can't use it. Um, at normal dose, it does nothing. But it's a funny thing, at 3 milligrams a day instead of the 200, it really settles down the microglial activation. So a lot of the cognitive function comes from that. It takes about 2 months. You can get it from compounding pharmacies by prescription for about 60 cents a day to $1 a day. It's not very expensive. Can have a dramatic benefit at healing any residual brain issues.
Interesting. Okay,
Uh,
so
and
even for people, sorry, go ahead.
then you asked about the heart because a lot of you are having palpitations and racing heart and all this other stuff.
Yeah,
First of all, if you're having a palpitation, dead heart cells don't palpitate. So the heart injury that they had was not likely, unless you had an overt heart attack. The cells were not dead; they were just stunned, which means they can and will come back. And there's simple things you can do to really speed recovery of the heart muscle and improve function and decrease the palpitations. Magnesium, B vitamins, high dose, like 50 milligram B complex, ribose, acetylcarnitine, coenzyme Q10. These I'll give you an example. As I mentioned, I live in Hawaii, and uh, we were met this fellow one day. He was an elderly engineer. He and his wife and the kids are all Mensa kind of folks. And we asked what they're doing in Hawaii, and the wife said, "Well, my husband's here to die." And I said, "Huh?" And she said, "Well, the doctor said you've only got 6 weeks to live because of your heart failure, and there's nothing I can do for you." And she said, "You're not going to freeze to death here in Alaska. You'll at least die where it's warm in Hawaii." And this
Mm,
guy was barely moving a step or two with a heart failure.
wow.
And I said to him, "You're right. Your doctor is right. There is nothing she could do for you, but it doesn't mean there's nothing you can do." And I gave him that simple recipe. For those who don't scribble frantically, if you go, there's a free phone app called Cures, Cures, capital A dash C, Cures A to Z. There's a $2 upgrade. Look up heart disease, the recipe's all there. Um, and 2 years later, I get a call from this guy. I got an email from the guy. Subject header: "You saved my life."
Ah,
These things are very, very, very treatable. But again, if something is cheap, and especially if it's not patentable, those two go together. Your doctor will not hear about the research. It's just
interesting.
it's a quirk
That's
in our healthcare system.
ah, that makes me crazy. But Cures A to Z, the app, I just put that in the chat, so that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and so you just noted that you did the low dose naltrexone, and you're finding that helpful. So this is about 70% of people, 75% of people get really nice improvement with the low dose naltrexone. There's some things we'll talk about that help 5%, some 10%, some 90%. I'll try to
Yeah,
give an idea of what the more important things are, but you need to tailor it person to person.
right. Okay. So we do have some other questions around brain function, cognitive function that we'll get to in a little bit. But we forgot. I I want to hear firsthand about why you started studying and working with people with myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and other pain syndromes. I
Laura, I got into it the old-fashioned way. I had it. It was back in 1975. My dad was dead, so I was paying my way through college and med school, and I did college in about 2.5 years because when I realized that you pay by the year and not by the credit, I just did 60 credits a year. I just, and drove through. And then I did my
wow.
work to pay my way through while I was doing all of that. And then I went to med school and figured I'd race through that and keep on going. And I was working as a nurse in Children's Hospital, doing, an accelerated medical school load. And those two things were the easiest part of my life. Uh, uh, there are other family chaos things that kind of came in that really set me up for it. But then I got what I call the drop dead flu. It's a nasty viral infection it was clear from the test that there was a severe virus. They had what's called atypical lymphocytosis. So it was that, but they couldn't isolate the virus. And the professors were all very nice and good. For the first 3 months, they just figured, well, it's a virus. But by 3 months, they figured I should have recovered already. And they figured, well, he just has depressed med student syndrome. He's not better yet, so he must be depressed.
Yeah.
And I couldn't function, and finally I had to drop out of medical school, and I couldn't work, so I was actually homeless, sleeping in parks.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
and I figured my life was over. My whole life had been geared to being a healer, which in those days meant being a physician. Um, and there I am in Tulsa on a park bench. And it's as if the universe put a holistic homeless medical school sign on my park bench. It was odd. All these people came by, naturopaths, herbalists, energy workers, and these chiropractors. And, each of them taught me bits and pieces of the puzzle. I mean, there I am on my park bench in Tulsa, of all places. And you know,
Wow.
all these people come wandering by, and if they had pizza, then I ate those days. It wasn't like common for me to go days without eating. Um, I learned people are really sweet. It was part of what I learned there. There's all kinds of stories on the road, um, and over time, I had gotten enough information from all these different people that I started to learn. I put together a treatment approach for myself for what I needed because I could tell from there wasn't even a name fibromyalgia back then. It was
Yeah.
just
I was
amorphous
I was
mix of
wondering.
symptoms.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny when they finally came out with the name chronic fatigue syndrome fibromyalgia. Oh, that's what I had. It's like, okay. Um, but I was able to get myself well, go back to med school, got my honors in medicine, and I've spent the last 45 years uh, my passion being making effective treatment available for everybody with these conditions because they're not getting it from their standard doctors. There are more and more holistic doctors learning. Um, the ones in standard medicine who learn, it's usually like Ron Davis, brilliant. It's because they had it or they have a family member with it.
Hmm.
John
Yeah.
Chia, his son had it. So that's what gets people into this, and that's what a nice doctor like me is doing in a field like this. You know.
I love it. I mean, goodness, that's I think we all have
Mhm.
our introductions to it, and that one just threw you in the deep end, in lots of different ways. So
Yeah, it turned
we
out to be a
are.
blessing.
What's that?
It turned out to be a blessing.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. So yeah, let's get to some of these other
Okay, let me roll
questions
through
here.
them. So, glutathione will be taken orally or nebulized. For most
Oh,
of you, it's
great.
going to be much easier just to go ahead and take it by mouth, one or two twice a day. For those of you with severe pulmonary symptoms, if you can find a holistic doctor who can work with a compounding pharmacy to get it nebulized, definitely go ahead and do it that way. Most of you won't need that though. So, um, in terms of those, I don't expect you to get all of this. There's no test afterward. Um, this is, I know we're going through a lot of territory and you can't do the brain fog. It's hard to get it all. That's okay. I just want to give you the flavor of what's going on. There are tools available uh, at www.energyanalysisprogram.com. There's a free quiz you can take. It'll analyze your symptoms. If you have lab tests available, it'll analyze the pertinent lab tests, although you don't need the lab tests.
It's
Um,
energyanalysisprogram.com, is that correct?
correct.
Okay. Yeah,
And
and
it's okay.
and just real quickly for everybody, I'm going to be going through and editing this so that you have one segment at a time, so that you can access it that way. And then, tons of other resources that Dr. Teitelbaum's going to be giving you that I'll send to you, and his book From Fatigue to Fantastic. Would you recommend starting there, Dr. Teitelbaum?
Yes, because
Okay.
the From
Yep.
Fatigue Fantastic, the new fourth edition just came out September. Get the one with the green cover. Do not get a used one because they will send you the old edition, even though they say it's a new one.
Ah,
Make sure it's a green cover because this is totally updated from 12 years
okay.
ago.
Okay.
So the nice thing is you can get the book and say, "Oh my God, this is 400 pages, and how I brain fog, I can't do this." Don't don't worry, don't panic. The book has what are called brain fog friendly summaries. At the beginning of each section, it takes a quick summary of here are the key things you need to know, and you can go through everything you need in the book in 1 hour. Even with brain
Wow.
fog. And then if there's something you say, wow, that sounds a lot like me and I want more information, then you can delve down into the thing. But it really summarizes what you'll find in dozens of books instead of having to read a book on mast cell activation, a book on adrenal, and a book on thyroid, and a book on sensitivities, and a book on mold toxins, and a book on it's all summarized there on infections. And it's all just there and simple. So I would start with the book. At the
Okay.
energy analysis program, we'll take all the stuff I'm talking about, and it won't address the specific things for COVID in terms of the heart, brain, and lung stuff we talked about. So just play back the tape and just get that done. But it will analyze it, determine what the underlying energy drains are in your situation, and tailor a protocol to optimize that for you and your physician. I actually hold
Perfect.
U.S. patent for a computerized doctor. I made that for people specifically with CFS and fibro. When we first put out the online questionnaire, we charged $400. We told people if they can't afford, we'd let them do it for free. And 80% of people wrote back that they were destitute from the illness. And my wife and I just made a decision to make it free for everybody. And it
Nice.
was
Wow.
just so this you can get it there. It's all there. It will 15 minutes. It will tell you what the key things are in your case,
That's
what to do.
amazing, Doc. That is incredible. Yeah, so I want to get to some of our questions from our support group um, submissions. So kind of along the same lines as what we were talking about as far as damage caused to the body. Pa asked if our mitochondria is damaged.
Well, damage isn't the right word for it, but they tend to get smaller and less effective. So there's mitochondrial dysfunction
Okay.
more than damage that's going on.
Okay.
So again, a lot of the treatments we'll talk about, if you want to optimize energy production, it's similar things for what we gave for the heart because it's about optimizing energy. Shine ribose, we published 2 studies, increases energy production 61% on average, which if you think about 61% more energy, that's pretty wow.
That's a lot.
So I would use the SHINE form of ribose because that's the form we used in the study. You can get on Amazon or at nfatigue.com. 5 grams, which is 1 scoop 3 times a day for the first bottle. And then you can take it down to 1 in the morning and 1 in the early afternoon. A good multivitamin, I like the Energy Revitalization System vitamin powder because 1 drink replaces literally over 50 pills. And try getting what's in the 1 drink in less than 50 pills. And if you can, I'll give you a free bottle. It's just, you won't be able to. It gets all of those B vitamins, magnesium, amino acids, energy. It's just in there. Everything you should be getting from the food in optimal levels. Um, so those two make a big difference. I'll give coenzyme Q10, 200 milligrams a day. I like a new chewable one by Terry Naturally because it has the absorption of 8 pills. And I'll also give acetyl-carnitine. Again, this is
Oh,
all, uh, if you ask for the treatment checklist, it's all laid out in there. If
okay.
you want one simple thing, what I would do, if I was looking for a couple things to start with, for those with the illness, I would get the Energy Revitalization System vitamin powder. I would get the Smart Energy System that has the ribose and 5 other key energy nutrients. And herbals, I would just start with those two. And I would get something called recovery factors. That's the study that I was mentioning, just got accepted for publication today. That one in people with the fibromyalgia, 60% improved with an average 69% increase in energy and quality of life. That was life changing for a lot of people. And that study,
That's yeah,
they
that's awesome. So
emailed back.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So that was just accepted today. So those are 3 things. If you're looking for, well, we're talking about hundreds of things. How do I start?
Mhm.
Those are 3 good things to start with. The recovery factors are so new, you probably won't even find that on a search. So go to recoveryfactors.com and follow the dosing instructions on the website. It comes from
Okay.
Europe. It'll take about a month to arrive.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit because I know that one of the places that I got caught up when I first started trying to do your shine protocol was that I found that the D-ribose and the CoQ10 made me even more anxious and kind of
low,
shaky,
low
jittery.
adrenal, low adrenal. In other words, it's creating more energy, but your adrenal gland is low and you're not able to get it, use that energy and go into gear. It's kind of like stepping on the gas when you're in neutral. Stepping
Right.
on the gas and going 70 miles down the highway is fine. But if you're stepping on the gas that same amount and you're in neutral, it doesn't feel good.
Okay.
So in
So for
most
people
cases,
who are experiencing that, what would you recommend?
there's something called adrenaplex. I'll go with specific products because in the natural food industry, there's a lot of quality control issues, and I'm very picky about what different things I recommend for people. And most of these, you can get them either on my website at endfatigue.com or you can get them on Amazon, you know. And it's just, I mean, if you support me, thanks. Helps me get the information out to people, but really, whatever works best for you is good. Adrenaplex, Adrena, Plex, will smooth out the adrenal function dramatically for most people. For those of you in marriage counseling or divorce court, a lot of times it's because of low blood sugar. And that causes your claws to come out and you get these irritable when hungry called hangry. Um, that's low adrenal. You don't need any other tests than that. That irritability when hungry, you need adrenal support. The adrenoplex helps out. So it sounds, Lori, like you had that as part of your thing. So when you took your ibos, you can handle the energy.
Yep. Yep. Very interesting. Very cool. Okay. So let's see. So just as far as determining whether you now have ME/CFS/FM, when has a case transitioned from long COVID to ME? Does the usual 6-month rule still apply, or are doctors beginning to move to a shorter?
Yeah, yeah. Doctors are still using the 8-year rule. No, it's most doctors are just gonna. Your doctor, if you went to me and said, "Hey, Doctor T, I need heart bypass surgery," and I said, "I don't do that," and you said, "Here's a book from Bypass to Fantastic and a scalpel," it's like, I don't do that. Doesn't make me a bad doctor. That's just not my expertise. That your doctor doesn't know about any of this does not make them bad doctors. If they say,
Yeah.
but like I said before, if they say, "I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong," let's see if you can find somebody who does. That's good. If they say, "I don't know what's wrong with you," and imply you're crazy, anxious, whatever, they're trying to be good people, but that's kind of screwed up when they do that.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
so in terms of when I would consider it, come 3 months if symptoms are still persisting, especially if you have trouble getting sleep despite being exhausted, you've got to process. I would just move forward and do the treatment to get better.
Okay, so yeah, we did go over how you can tell if you do have post-viral chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. So, and you said that's severe fatigue with insomnia. What if you only have one or the other? What if you don't have the insomnia, but you still have, let's say, post-exertional malaise, also known as
Yep.
exercise intolerance?
Then I'm going to be looking more for other causes of the fatigue, and as opposed to you're having tripped a circuit breaker. In other words, you might have low adrenal or other issues going on. Um, but if
Even
you're
if
getting
it's
restored,
post-viral?
yes, if you're having restorative sleep where you wake up refreshed and you can sleep 8 hours a night, no problem. Again, you still have the long haulers, but I'm going to look for something besides hypothalamic dysfunction. It'll be a
Okay.
different mix of processes that are still very treatable, but it directs the evaluation.
Gotcha. And most people that I'm talking to and well, talking to and seeing online are experiencing insomnia. So do you want to jump into the Shine protocol? I don't know how much you wanted to get into that, but sleep. I know that's the first thing. That's the S.
Yep. Yep.
So
I think that's important because, again, no quiz at the end. I'm not expecting you to remember all of this. Just listen for the flavor because you'll start to go, "Oh my God, that's me." And then you'll understand, well, here's what to do. The book lays it out. The energy analysis program will sort it out and tell you exactly which of these things are going on. So again, relax, sit back, take it in just for an understanding overall flavor of things. So the shine protocol, uh, it has been shown in our, it was, again, we did a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study. It was put together with help of researchers at the NIH. And what we found is that using the SHINE protocol, 91% of people with CFS, and they had CFS or fibromyalgia an average of 8 years by the time they came into the study. 91% improved with an average increase in quality of life of improvement of 90%.
Wow.
That means a large percent of them no longer even qualified as having CFS or fibromyalgia by the end of the study. So, and this was over 20 years ago. So this has improved dramatically since then. So this is research proven. And I don't, and again, as half of people with CFS roughly in fibro are post-infectious. Again, it has been the case for each of the dozens of infections. There's no reason COVID should be any different. But what I'm looking forward to here today is, as my wife likes to say, we're all students, we're all teachers. So I'm inviting your questions because your questions also teach me. So ask as we go. So what's the SHINE protocol that we talk about? Um, S is for sleep. And you're going to say, well, I can barely get 5 hours sleep. It takes me hours to fall asleep. I wake up 2 in the morning every day. Every night I have trouble going back to sleep. That's because we talked about the hypothalamic circuit breaker goes offline. That's a little area back there. It controls sleep, so you can't sleep. And even if you fall asleep, it's non-restorative. It's not restful. You don't stay in deep sleep. Um, so there are a number of things. There's a number of natural things for sleep. Melatonin, the form that works best that I found is made by Nature's Bounty. It's called dual spectrum, 5 milligrams. They have probably a dozen magnesium melatonins. You want that specific one. Dual spectrum, 5 milligrams. It's a mixed immediate sustained release. That one's only available at Walgreens or on Amazon. You'll find some people selling it for $30, and then there's always been somebody selling it for $6. I don't know why. Get that one. And the energy, there's a revitalizing sleep formula, which is a mix of 6 herbs. Leaves most people without this illness sleeping like kittens. But it's a very good one to start with. No one of these things is going to be enough to get you sleeping your 8 hours. The sleep issue is so ingrained in the hypothalamic function. It's going to take a mix of 5, 6 different things to get you sleeping, and you will do better with a low dose of several things than a high dose of one. If I give you a high enough dose of a sleep medicine to get you sleeping all night, you'll be hungover till 4 in the afternoon.
Mm. Yep.
Um, so you'll find the terrific ZZZZ hemp oil is very good for sleep, as can for those who like it. Marijuana can be very helpful. For medications, for falling asleep, Ambien is the best medication. And again, it has its issues, but its benefits overall are worthwhile for most people with the disease, starting with low dose. But very tiny doses of trazodone, Flexeril, uh, a host of different medications like that, Neurontin, can be very helpful. And again, we get virtually everybody we treat getting their good solid sleep. And this getting solid sleep makes the pain go away. You'll find when you get a good night's sleep, your brain is working better, your energy is better. It really is a foundation piece to recovery here, because then one of the most powerful ways to immune suppress an animal is to sleep deprive it. So when you don't sleep, your immune system goes down, and then your body just it's kind of stuck. And so the sleep is critical.
Yes. Yep. Great. Do you want to go through the rest of the SHINE protocol?
Yep.
Yep.
So H is hormones and hypotension. So hormones, thyroid. Some of you, many of you probably had the experience. You go to the doctor and you say, I'm a poster child for low thyroid by my symptoms. And the doctor checks the blood test and says, nope, it's in the normal range, nothing wrong. And you go, well, but it sounds just like me. So here's the thing. It's important to realize what the normal range means and comes from, because I will guarantee you most doctors don't. I'll lecture to 400 or 500 doctors at a time. And one of the questions I love to ask is, you guys all rely on the normal range for blood tests. A person doesn't even have to walk in the room. If the test is normal, they're fine, right? And most people go, okay. And I say, where does the normal range come from? And it's like looking out in the audience and looking at like 400 deer with their eyes in the headlights. I have no idea where the normal range comes from. I guess an expert panel of wise elders with white beards and big white hair get together and say that if it's in this range, it's just fine, right? No, no such panels. The normal range, what they do is they take 100 people who are healthy, they do the test, and the 95 in the middle are defined as normal. It's called two standard deviations. It's just statistically derived, it has nothing to do with whether you're healthy or not. So if you're not in the highest or lowest 2% of the population, you're defined as normal. So to give an example that I gave, Dr. Oz is a friend of mine. He's very, very good despite he pissed off Monsanto and some of the pharmaceutical companies, so they decided to do a smear campaign. But this is a analogy I gave him that he likes to run with. Is that okay? So say you want a normal range for shoe sizes. A normal range would be size 5 to 13. So if I go to the shoe doctor and say I can't get my toe in the damn thing, my shoe doesn't fit, and he says it's a size 6, Jacob, it's in the normal range. Have a size 12 foot.
Mm, yeah.
That's an exact analogy to what's going on because you go to the thyroid, you'll notice your test is right on the low end. You're in like the lowest 5 percentile, but not the lowest 2%. And the TSH test is the most utter, useless, dangerous, harmful piece of crap test I think ever devised.
Yeah.
Um, sorry, but it's
No.
with hypothalamic dysfunction, the TSH is a meaningless test. In fact, I was lecturing in Italy at the World, they'd have every 2 years an annual main conference on fibro. And I asked one of the Professor Nick, who was lecturing with me, who's the world's main researcher on thyroid function in fibromyalgia. And I asked him, is TSH reliable in this disease? And he said, point blank, absolutely not. But for many of you, you'll find that's all your doctors rely on. So how do you tell if you need thyroid? Well, it's not rocket science. Tired, achy, weight gain, cold intolerant. You have 2 or 3 of those. You deserve a
Can you
trial.
say that again? I couldn't quite understand it.
Tired, achy, weight gain, cold intolerant.
Gotcha.
That sound like you? If you have even 2 of those with this process, you deserve a trial of desiccated thyroid. You
Mm.
don't adjust it until the test is normal. Now, just if I had a size 4 shoe and they said, well, here's a size 6, test normal now. Uh-uh. That's how most doctors do it or don't. You adjust it to the dose that feels the best, and then you check the free T4 blood test to make sure it's not elevated for safety. That's it for the thyroid. Now, we could spend 2 hours just talking about the different forms of thyroid that can be very helpful. Adrenal, we mentioned that earlier. Irritability when hungry, that is better than any test. I mean, I will do morning cortisols if they're under 14. I'm suspicious. But the bottom line, irritability when hungry, recurrent respiratory infections that take forever to go away, uh, dizzy when standing, uh, low blood pressure, these are all symptoms. Uh, and for the low adrenal, you need to cut out the sugar. Stevia is okay. The other sweeteners are okay too, but cut out the sugar and soda, especially sodas and fruit juices. Most people do better with a high protein, low carb diet with frequent small meals during the day. Most important, or as important as the sugar, is to increase salt intake. If you salt restrict with low adrenal, you will crash and burn.
Mm.
Your body wants more salt. You will like the salt, eat it. Eat the salt. In terms of the reproductive hormones, 70% of men are in the lowest 30th percentile for testosterone. They need bioidentical testosterone. And those over 50, I simply give a medicine called clomiphene, which is a cheap, benign thing. It stimulates your own body to make testosterone. So you don't suppress your own. In women, clomiphene is a very different animal. It can cause all kinds of symptoms, but in men, it's very benign. For women, if your symptoms, not PMS, but the tired, achy, headache, can't sleep, brain fog, are worse around menses, then you probably would warrant a trial of the reproductive bioidentical. Again, virtually always, except for birth control, I would use bioidentical hormones because that is what is safest, works best, and what your body wants. Now, the question is, well, why don't the drug companies make them all bioidentical? Well, it's very simple. You cannot patent the bioidentical hormone because it's been around for millennia.
Mm.
So you can't patent it, and therefore it's not profitable, and therefore they made synthetics that they could patent. That's why everybody's not using bioidentical. Um, so the um, so I will give bioidentical estrogen, progesterone, and the studies show in women with fibromyalgia that a little bit of testosterone, even if their level is normal, this is research by Professor Hilary White at Dartmouth, helps decrease the pain.
Interesting.
Um,
Huh.
so I will give the hormones. Also, hypotension, if you tend to get lightheaded and standing, or find after you're up and around for a bit, you get brain foggy. Um, as you mentioned, when we're an upright species, and when we stand up or a big bag of water, the blood all goes down to the legs. I mean, think about it. And we had to develop an autonomic system that sends up blood back up to our brain and other tissues. That system, called the autonomic system, is working poorly in this disease. So you'll get what's called orthostatic intolerance. Put into English, you stand up, your body doesn't like it because the blood's all rushing down, your brain's getting starved after 5 minutes. Um, there are two simple tests. You can do a tilt table test, which is a $2,000 waste of time. It'll make you sick as a dog.
Yeah.
Or if you email me and ask for the orthostatic intolerance sheet, I'll go ahead. There'll be a simple clinic out of the Mayo Clinic Journal. You do a quick quiz, and it'll give you a pretty good idea whether you have it. Alternatively, you can check your pulse while you're sitting quietly for about 10-15 minutes, and then stand up, stay in one place, and check your pulse every minute or two for 10 minutes. If it goes up more than 20 beats a minute, you probably have orthostatic intolerance. All kind of ways to check for it is pretty straightforward. Treatment is not difficult. There's a number of things. Again, start by salt and water loading, medium pressure compression stockings, and I'll go with mitogen, fluorine, FTD, AVP, and there's a host of other treatments can be helpful.
Okay, cool. So I want to take a little break because I know we still have I, N, and E. But one of the main things that people are running into is, like we've talked about or alluded to already, difficulty talking to their doctors about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what would you recommend? Would you recommend that they just drop their current doctor and go and find a holistic doctor, work with you, obviously, or, what?
Again, the problem that most people have is that, again, they'll do better with a holistic doctor. Not every holistic doctor is an expert on this, but they're much more likely to be familiar with it than your standard doctor. Also, your standard doctor, depending on the specialty, is an average of about 6 to 15 minutes per visit. And trying to do this in 15 minutes is like trying to treat heart bypass surgery. I've been doing this for 45 years, and it takes me 3 hours of my one-on-one time to do a proper
Wow.
assessment. I am very, very good at it. So start with a holistic doctor. I do treat people from all over the world. It can be by phone. Most people opt for that. Um, and again, it's a 3 hour consultation. For those that are interested, my appointments manager is, her email is Sarah, Sarah, and her email address is appointments with an S at the end at nfatigue.com. And she can help guide you with it. Now, the problem um, is that most insurance companies will not pay for time. If I cut you open and cut your skull open for Chiari, they'll happily pay $30,000. For the two,
Oh
three
boy.
hours. But they won't pay even a doctor's overhead for the 3 hours to sit with you. So most doctors that participate with insurance cannot spend the time, and most holistic doctors who are familiar spend the time, and therefore they cannot participate with insurance. So it becomes an out-of-pocket kind of a thing, and that's where the big grub is that since the insurance won't pay for time or holistic approaches, um, and a lot of people can't afford because they've been
Yeah.
sick. So that's the reason that, my goal has been very simple: making effective treatment available for everybody, and that's why we have the online computer program, the books, we have all the free information and tools at vitality101.com. It's kind of like, okay, how do you make effective treatment available for 50 million people worldwide?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And growing.
you'll see that each of the things, it's kind of a fun challenge. It's okay. How do you do this now? You use
Yeah.
social media, you make phone apps, we, create computerized doctors, we do the books and the research, and it's all geared to make effective treatment available for everybody. So if you're even flat broke, one of the things you can email me for is an information sheet of how do I get well if I have no money, you know,
Very cool.
because a lot of
Very
this you can
cool.
do on your own, and a lot of the medications are cheap. Especially for those who don't have insurance to cover the medications, there's a phone app called Good RX. Because if
Yeah.
you go in, like we mentioned, Ambien as a sleep med, if you go into a pharmacy without health insurance and you say, okay, here's a prescription for 90 pills, a lot of places will charge you $250, $300. But because they just pull a number out of their ear, you go to a pharmacy down the street, it's 150. You go to another, it says 320. You go to another, you go to Costco, it's 15. With an app, it's $10.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you don't have health insurance, even if you do, get the Good RX app. It's free, and you see what the medicine should cost you. It may even be less than your copay. So just a
That's
little
amazing.
survival tip for those with a disease.
Yep, perfect. And let's jump in and do a couple of questions here too, and then we'll get back to the I, N, and E of the Shine protocol if that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh, One of the questions from, and this is from Pa again, how do we bring down inflammation in our body?
Well, don't presume that you're having inflammation, first of all. A lot of it is more free radical and other issues. Um, in a blood test that we do is called the sedimentation rate. That's part of the new patient, our new consultation panel I do on everybody. And that measures inflammation. So if people have a lot of inflammation, it's high. Most people with fibromyalgia, it's actually low. So inflammation is a funny word. It's imbalance of the immune system. But to settle down and balance inflammation, number one, fish oil, omega-3. And
Mm.
again, I'm very picky about what I use. I will use one called Vectomega, where one pill replaces 8 big fish oil pulls and not getting rancid fish oil and having fish oil burps all day.
What was
So
it called again?
Vecto, Vecto, Mega, MEGA, and just one a day is fine. In addition, curcumin is good, but if you just have turmeric or curcumin, it's so poorly absorbed, you'd have to get like 350 turmeric pills to get the equivalent of uh, 8 curcumin pills to get the equivalent of the one that I'll use. If you're having pain, I recommend something called Curamin, Curamin. Again, uh, Curamin will settle down inflammation dramatically. It's actually in the head-on studies been more effective than Celebrex. Um, and so give it 6 weeks to see the full effect. Those two together, the Vectomeg and Curamin, really settle down the inflammation dramatically. Cutting
Okay.
down the sugar, white flour helps also.
What
Um,
about for people who are vegetarians? For the
or- and then the flax oil.
Okay.
Uh, Flaxseed oil again is not as effective, but or you can use the I'm blocking on the name. It's like the algae oil. It's a marine. uh, I'm blocking on
Okay.
the name. Sorry. Dr. McCullough has a good one. If you look
Oh,
at his,
sure. Okay.
but that's if you're not considering algae food, animal food, then if you're vegan, and that should be okay.
Right.
Um, but for most people, the fish oil is a good way to do that, or eating salmon or tuna 2, 3 times a week will do it. Be a good job with it. Um, so for the inflammation, that would be it, and for the pain. Now, for medications for pain, um, gabapentin I find is much better than Lyrica, much less side effects. Tramadol is a very reasonable pain medication. We do not see addictive issues beyond what we see from Prozac with that when used properly. And then there's literally dozens of natural uh, hemp oil can be helped. There's many, many things for pain. I can count on my fingers and toes how many of the thousands of severe chronic pain patients I've treated that I've not been able to get good, solid pain relief. The problem with most physicians, again, is not the lack of effective tools, it's lack of effective education.
Mm.
Pain can be effectively treated.
Yeah. So speaking of pain, first of all, what causes it, and then also there's so many different types of pain that people are experiencing. We have
Yep.
the
And
fibromyalgia all over pain. There's the myofascial pain
I'll lay it out.
syndrome. There's joints. There's,
Yep.
yeah. So
Let me lay it out.
headaches.
So there's seven kinds of pain in fibromyalgia, and seven main ones. And what you'll find is the vast majority of people, the way it starts is that remember we talked about this illness as an energy crisis. When muscles don't have enough energy, they get locked in a shortened position. It takes more energy for a muscle to relax than to contract. Now, that seems counterintuitive. If I'm lifting up something heavy, it should take
Yeah.
more energy to contract the muscles. But think about it. If you have a heavy workout and you come home and you don't go, honey, my muscles are all loose and limp, the workout I had, whew, you go, they're all tight. So when your muscles don't have enough energy, they're like a spring. They get stuck in a shortened position. It takes more energy to release them.
Oh,
So the low energy body wide causes all the muscles to do this. And after a couple of weeks of being stuck in a shortened position, they hurt. Now you may find you go to a body worker or a chiropractor or somebody who's doing muscle myofascial release and rest, and you say, "Oh, that feels better," which tells you automatically that that is muscle pain, and it feels better for a couple of days, and then the same low energy is there, and the muscles go right back down and tight again. Once you have the chronic tight muscles and the pain from that, virtually any chronic pain will trigger central sensitization or brain pain. If you think about it, pain is not an outside enemy. Pain is like the oil light on your body's dashboard saying something needs attention. So the standard, you go to your doctor, you say, my oil light's flashing. That's annoying. The doctor says, no problem. Let's put a band-aid over that oil light.
yeah. Yeah.
Better? Then your motor falls out and you go, damn, unlucky day today, you know? But if you just put oil in the car, the pain goes away, or the oil light goes off. If you give the body what it needs, the pain goes away. This is what our research has shown. Um, but if you don't and the pain continues, say the oil light's there and the oil keeps getting lower and lower, and that light gets louder and louder. Well, the body has a mechanism called central sensitization of brain pain that if the pain is persistent and we are not addressing what the body is asking for, it amplifies the pain and then can generate it on its own. Most
Mhm.
of the medications are geared to central sensitization, which is why that's all that most people have heard about, because that's what the drug company advertising is pushing. But it's just one component. The low dose naltrexone that we talked about earlier, very, very helpful for the brain pain. Then, when you have chronic central sensitization and brain pain, it triggers small fiber neuropathy, which is small fiber nerve injury. So 44% of you will have numbness and tingling in your fingertips. No big deal.
Yeah.
It's and then the small fiber neuropathy is a secondary trigger for the autonomic dysfunction. And then you start getting the low blood pressure and lightheaded and rapid pulse and on gut problems and all these other things. And then if it goes more severe, then you'll see allodynia where light touch hurts. Most of you are not going to be at that later stage yet. Better to nip it in the bud before you get there. And then migraines and the rest certainly. And gout
Okay.
issues.
So, yeah, we did just have a question about migraines because it seems like a lot of people with long COVID are experiencing my chronic migraines.
Yeah. And again, that goes away with the whole treatment usually. So, a couple things. Number one, start with the easy things magnesium, 200 milligrams a day, and riboflavin, which is vitamin B2, 400 milligrams a day. If you do that for 6 weeks, you'll decrease migraine frequency by about 80% and severity. So that's been shown in multiple double blind studies. So start with the easy things. For those of you whose migraines are mostly around your menses and ovulation, it's the fluctuating hormones, reproductive hormones that's triggering it, and using a bioidentical patch to stabilize the hormones, especially around your menses or ovulation. Because if you have that, you go to the doctor and they'll give you the Imitrex medications and triptans, all these other things. None of them will work. They'll call you refractory migraine. Those are usually hormonal related. And that's why you'll see it's around menses and ovulation. So you just balance those out. So these simple things can make a difference. After that, I'll go after food allergies and a number of other things. Excedrin migraine, but you need to take one tablet more than the recommended dose on the box, is as effective as Imitrex. But since it's 50 cents instead of $50, your doctor will talk to you about the triptan medications, not the Excedrin migraine.
Okay, Great. What about somebody asked about having really weak arms on and off for the last couple of weeks, and when they are super tired and weak, they twitch.
Mm.
And then she also said, could you recommend something that's more of a natural pain control because hemp is not available in her country?
Okay, so basically, uh, Curamin and N-Pain are two mixes. What you want to look for in your country is if you can get a curcumin, not turmeric, but curcumin, but it's going to take a lot unless they add the turmeric oil back in for absorption. But see if you can find a highly absorbed one. Boswellia,
Mm.
which is frankincense, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. Willow bark, you're looking for about the um, 80 to 160 milligrams of salicin component. It should be standardized to that 3 times a day. Black cherry can also be helpful. But again, the medications cyclobenzaprine, gabapentin, and even tramadol, but that may be a little harder to get now from your doctor. All of these can be very, very helpful. Those would be, again, I gave maybe 7 things there, but there are literally dozens of things for pain relief. But if you treat the underlying root cause, again, we talked about putting oil in the car and the oil light goes away. When you give your body the shine protocol, the pain goes away in most cases.
Yep. So that's a great segue. Let's go back to that. And Adriana, I will definitely come back to your question. So I think we were on the I, or we can go ahead and let's go ahead and answer a question here.
Let me just get that, Adriana's. So, do you have to take the supplements for the rest of the life? No. In our double-blind placebo-controlled study, most people were continuing to improve at the 2-year mark and had been able to wean off of most of the treatments. So, what happens is that when people are feeling back to themselves for 9 months, that gives the body a chance to take over on its own. I routinely ask, okay, here's the thing. You're doing better for 9 months. Your body can probably handle on its own right now. Let's start. And I show them how do you start weaning off each of the
Mhm.
things one at a time. One pill of anything of every 2 weeks is a simple way to do it. If you don't feel worse when you cut it back, your body's saying fine, and then another pill of something 2 weeks later. However, if you feel worse when you cut it back, your body says still want that one, put it back in. You're feeling good. Then 2 weeks later, something else. And it's really about half and half. What I do when I tell people that, half of people are saying, "Yay, I'm ready to get rid of the shoebox full of stuff." And how do we do it? And we just like go through. And the other half is the only way you are getting any of these medicines or supplements away from me is out of my cold, dead fingers. You know, and
Yeah.
either way, I tell them is okay. There's nothing here you can't take long term. But
Oh, that's great.
they're finally feeling better, and they're afraid to have the rug pulled out from under them.
Yep.
There's no need to have the rug pulled out from under you. You can take them long term, but by 2 years, most people can wean off most things. That's what the research showed.
Okay, great. So because we do have a lot more questions, and we have about 40 minutes left. So
Mhm.
how would you like to proceed? Do you want to go through the INE?
Infections and nutrition. Yeah, well, let's go
Yep.
through the rest of Shine
Yep.
because we already talked about what to do specifically for the lung, heart, and brain issues of the COVID. And I think people know how to diagnose it now. Tired, achy brain fog, can't sleep, persisting more than 3 months. Now, again, there are hundreds of other symptoms that you can have, but those are the core. It's an energy crisis. So, I for infections, it's not just the COVID. The COVID, in most of the cases, it's long gone. Your
Yeah.
body
Yeah.
that.
Oh, and real quickly, are people with long COVID still contagious?
No, and it's not contagious. People worry with fibromyalgia and CFS because there's a bunch of infections. No, they're not contagious.
Okay.
Don't see that in the
Yep.
families. I've treated thousands of people over 40 years now, and you don't see that.
Okay.
So the problem is that there are many viruses that the body doesn't actually ever completely kill. For example, chickenpox. Most of you had had chickenpox. What the body does is it kills most of them, or Epstein-Barr, or HSV6, or HSV. But what it does, though, is that it keeps some of them in prison. I have no idea why it does that instead
Huh.
of killing them all off. But when you have a healthy immune system, maybe it uses them to train the soldiers in the immune system. Here's how you recognize these guys. Okay, look, here's how you kill them. I don't know.
Huh.
But the bottom line is when the immune system goes down, you'll see a jailbreak. and these viruses can come out. That's why chickenpox, people are immune to it, they've had it, but they still get shingles, which is when you have a jailbreak in one of the nerve cells and the virus spreads around and causes a painful thing. So you'll see that. But with shingles, because if you went to the doctor and said, I have this big painful red thing all the way along, the doctor can't say, well, there's nothing wrong with you because he said, I have this big painful red
Right.
thing, But when you have most of them, when they have a jailbreak, don't cause the skin rash. They just cause you to feel like how you're feeling right now. And the doctor, since there's no test for it, says, well, the tests are normal, so you must be fine. But I feel fluish and achy all the time. Well, tests are normal, and
Yep.
my crazy, so there it is. Um, but the viral reactivation is common. We don't know whether that's going to be the case with COVID. Probably not, because we don't see that with the coronavirus family. It's more with
Huh.
uh, the families like EBV, CMV,
Maybe. Okay.
HV6. Those are the ones that and chickenpox. These are all kind of pretty related. So that family tends to have jailbreaks. So the bottom line, the simple answer is no. I tease, my kids I used to tease my kids to say their bedtime prayers and God bless mommy and daddy. And my daddy one day just give a yes or no answer. But anyway, so the answer is no, not contagious.
Yep. Yep. Great.
um, so there are many infections because the immune system goes down. A lot of old infections will tend to either escape or come to the surface. The most
Mm.
important in this illness is candida. There's no
Yeah.
test for candida overgrowth that distinguishes normal growth. How do you tell? If you have chronic nasal congestion, sinusitis, or irritable bowel syndrome, gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, I presume candida is present and I treat it. Now, for most people with candida, you're going to have enough gas to blow up a weather balloon, but it won't have much of a smell. If it has that sulfur smell, we'll talk down and dirty here. Remember in grade school, Silent but Deadlies? So I'll be this one little kid who would everybody go, oh, and the little kid would turn around and say,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, that silent but deadly smell is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Okay.
Um, and for that, there's Ultra MFP Forte. It's an herbal for a month. They'll usually take care of it. The medication rifaximin takes care of it, but it's like $1,500 for the 10-day course.
Whoa.
Yeah. Whole nother discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the candida, again, the book will talk about it, but diflucan 200 milligrams a day for 6 weeks, cutting it, not one day, it was 6 weeks,
Mm.
at least cutting out sugar intake because yeast grow by fermenting sugar. I will use a good probiotic. I will use things like lufeneron or Capralex, or there's a host of natural antifungals, but I
Mm.
will go with the diflucan for that. Uh, some have antibiotic sensitive infections, not so much in this population because they're still kind of new but
Yeah.
if you find that if you get amoxicillin for dental work or something, the fatigue and pain go away for 10 days, you have an antibiotic sensitive infection, and then it's worth considering that for a prolonged period of time. The antivirals, again, the same thing here. You may see viral reactivation, but I would be slow to treat with those in this process. Now, there are things, though, to help your body recover. And I want to talk a moment about prevention. So, not for you guys, but for your family members. Um,
Mm.
the media has really, over the last 20 years, when I was a kid, when I was your age, the media mantra for advertisers was sex sells. You wanted to sell something, you'd have a handsome guy or a pretty lady standing next to the car or the beer, and
Mm-hmm.
that would sell it. The current mantra is fear and divisiveness sells. And the media has been hitting most of what's in the news media is the fiction. I'm sorry, God bless them. They're nice people, sweet folks.
Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah.
They like me. God, thank God, they like me too. Unless they hear me saying this stuff, then they may not anymore. But most of the stuff in there is a fiction. I'm on both sides. On Fox, and I'm on the liberal and conservative side, and they're both fictions. Um, the liberal side, you're not going to have flat out lies. What they will do is simply leave out critical pieces of data. Where on the conservative side, they will take the storyteller's prerogative and embellish. So we say neither one is more accurate than the other. So, and both of them mislead. They only give you the information to think one side of the story, not the other. And both of them are, the medical term is FOS. It's full of stool. Um, and I recommend you turn it off. And this has become even more accelerated and amplified with the COVID.
Mhm.
The information about the COVID is grossly misrepresented. Basically, if you look at the company that makes remdesivir, for example,
Mhm.
they're the third largest pharmaceutical advertiser. And the media, you'll find there's studies showing little bits of benefit from remdesivir and hospitalized, and it's reasonable to give, but the media was falling all over themselves. You know, oh, this is a new answer, remdesivir, remdesivir, remdesivir. And, it's kind of like training a dog. When you want the dog to do something, if it does what you want, you give it a bacon bit, a treat, roll over, okay, play dead, bacon bit, good, and you train the dog. And the news media has been trained by the pharmaceutical industry. And again, the pharmaceutical industry are good people. They're all good
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
One of my
yeah,
best friends was a pharmaceutical exec. In fact, he taught me the workings of the industry and the rest. But what the media has learned is that if they say anything positive about one of their advertisers, they get advertising. If they say anything negative about natural remedies, they get advertising. In fact, a lot of pharmaceutical advertising contracts, if the magazine has an ad for this drug, the contract will include language like you will not be allowed to have anything positive about natural remedies anywhere in this issue.
yeah, yeah.
If
Wow.
you're running this ad, that they agree to that, and they've learned that if they say anything negative about negative stuff, it's like here's a bacon bit. The advertising
Right.
in.
Right.
And,
Yeah, that's
you
it's
know,
crazy. I would like
so
to bring it back to
I'm segueing back into this.
okay,
So
awesome.
what you're going to find is that the media will focus mostly on whatever expensive medications, and that's where they will heap praise. But anything that is low cost, especially if it's natural, or a medication that's generic and low cost, they will slam it, regardless of what the research shows, and they are misrepresenting the research. So what the research shows, vitamin D, optimizing vitamin D is critical, um, arguably one of the most critical things you can do. Uh, so for your family members, it's a good idea for them to be taking at least 1,000 units of D a day. So there's an argument for more. Zinc, I think, is birth control for this virus. And it's poison to it. 50 milligrams a day. So it's reasonable, even being post-virus, to be doing these things. And a simple way to do it is the energy revitalization system vitamin powder I mentioned, plus something called ViraPro, VIRAPRO, one a day. And that's what I take myself. I'm technically, I'm 31 years old, but I was born 68 years ago. And um, so technically I'm in that group. I don't worry about going out. I do the basic common sense, social distancing, masking when appropriate. Um, but I take the vitamin powder and the ViraPro and the zinc, the vitamin D, the vitamin K, and the vitamin C. Those four things are critical for decreasing the risk of the COVID becoming severe. Reasonable in your case, again, the multi and the ViraPro will take care of that for you, but for your family members too, because they are at somewhat higher risk. The ones that are blood relatives is about double the risk of the average population of getting the long hauler. That goes from, and so reasonable for them to be on it too. But again, what you hear in the media is not reflecting what the research shows. So the medications that are cheaper, there are ones that are helpful, but enough on that. So for the infections, we've covered the main things for that. Nutrition, um, cut down sugar, increase salt, increase water. I know that you're going to say, but I drink like a fish, but you pee like a racehorse. One of the hormones that's low is antidiuretic hormone, which is anti-peeing hormone. It's one of those controlled by the hypothalamic circuit that's offline.
Hmm.
So you're kind of like a pail trying to hold water, having holes in the bucket. So you need a lot of salt and a lot of water. And then you'll find again, if you have the irritable and hungry, low adrenal, frequent small meals during the day can be very helpful. Um, the also again, the vitamin powder is really nice because one drink replaces 50 pills. And I'm warning you, it was back ordered for 3 months, and now they're back ordered again. There's still some left, but it will probably disappear in about a month for another month or
Sure.
two. But
Sure. And so we have a question
mm,
around taking supplements. A lot of us are taking or being recommended several different supplements. Where do you find information about interactions between different supplements?
all of these play pretty well together. Everything I've mentioned today, if
Mm,
there is a problem, then I either just leave it out or I mention it.
okay.
In general, there's not a big problem with interactions between supplements because it's like saying, well, how do I wonder what foods are going to interact poorly? All of
Mm,
these are similar to that. So they're things that your body is used to having all coming together because they've been in nature for mm,
great.
countless years. It's when you're having chemicals that are new to the body that the body really hasn't learned how to process and get rid of that you have the bigger problem. And there are exceptions, but again, most like grapefruit juice, but that's more with medications, even though it can help some supplements. It's really just not a big deal.
Okay. Okay.
And
So that's the I portion of it. What about the N?
so, and we talked about the vitamin powder recovery factors. I would recommend all of you start and just get the recovery factors at recoveryfactors.com. That has been a life changer. That's I'm a bit partial because we just finished the study, and like I mentioned earlier in the show, that study was just accepted for publication today by the journal. So that was a happy email to get this morning. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. Again, 60% of people with severe fibromyalgia improved. Average increase in quality of life, 69%. Picture what 69% better feels like. And they knew within 3 weeks. So
Wow.
go to recoveryfactors.com. Uh, it'll take about 2 to 4 weeks to come from Europe. Um, and on the website, there'll be a link that says dosing. Follow the instructions in the dosing link. There'll be a diet you can do for 3, 4, 5 days that can help, optional, worth doing if it's not inconvenient.
Okay.
The main email I kept getting from people during the study was I kept getting this panicked email from people. And what they all asked was, will this be available after the study? It was one of those things. So if you're looking for really, in the study, we did a subset where we measured pre and post protective antibodies. They went up 14%, which is a lot on average.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. So, yep. So that's the N. How about the E? I want to get to some of these questions because we still have a
oh,
lot.
then wrap up and go to, I'm only seeing the questions on the side here. So, okay, E is exercise is able. Again, you'll see a lot of studies in fibro talking about, graded exercise programs and pushing exercise. Some of the doctors you go to will say, well, just exercise. And what I would recommend is you just take them by the throat and strangle them. Not really, but
Yeah.
it's,
That's what it feels like sometimes, right? Because exercise is tough. I mean, if you push even just a little bit, even just in your regular daily activities,
you're
if you're,
bedridden for 3 days. Yeah, it's post-exertional malaise. You're going to
yeah,
be hit like a truck, feel like you got hit by a truck.
yeah,
But if you do no exercise, what happens is people are afraid because they overdo it. They're lined up, find themselves in bed for 3 days, and then they're afraid to do even little bits and they decondition.
yep,
It's that deconditioning that's the problem. So ignore all those people talking about, just exercise more. Ignore them.
no, yeah,
But go for walks as much as you comfortably can. Now, some of you, not some people with the disease are bedbound, and
yep,
then
yep.
we'll do exercise in bed, and when we can, we'll do flotation pool, warm water pool, because the exercise helps them recondition enough to get out of bed. But for most of you, walk as much as you comfortably can, where you feel good, tired after, and better the next day.
Well, so quick question, because when you say walk as much as you comfortably can, because and this is where, I teach pacing, and I also have exercise yoga programs for people who are bedbound. But the tricky thing is, right, that while you're doing it, you might not know that you're doing too
That's
much.
why start slow and increase. Start by something you know that you can do regularly, and then
Yeah,
increase it by 50 steps a day
great.
on average. Don't stop in mid stride at 50 steps more, but just little by little, so your body can tell you, because you're not going to go from like 800 steps a day and be fine and go to 850 and be laid out in bed. So gradually do it. Listen to your body, and You don't have to listen too closely because it's not going to be subtle with you. And then once you find what's comfortable, just stay there for 8 to 10 weeks on the program. And 8 to 10 weeks on the program, energy production will be skyrocketing, so you'll be able to condition instead of just crashing.
Okay, awesome. So what causes the post-exertional malaise, the
Because
crash?
you don't have enough energy to condition. Most of the time, we use up our glycogen energy stores in the muscles, and that signals the body make more glycogen, and we're able to draw energy from other forms of aerobic metabolism. With the post-exertional malaise, one, you can't condition more because you don't have enough energy to lay down more glycogen stores and bulk up. But then you also are forced to go to anaerobic metabolism, making energy without oxygen, and that's very
Ah,
inefficient, makes a lot of lactic acid, and basically throws crashes the system.
okay. And what's the reason that you can't always tell while you're doing it? So, typically if I'm working out and I'm well, then my body lets me know when I'm too tired and I'm going to feel
Yeah, that's
tired
a
later on in the day or the
that's a,
next day.
that's a really good question. The answer is we don't know.
We don't know. All right. Okay. Very, very interesting. Okay. So I think we have some more questions about exercise, but we'll get to those. I'm seeing other posts from people experiencing, this is from one of the support groups. I'm seeing other posts from people experiencing back, shoulder, neck, and hip pain. She's experiencing the same thing.
Yep, chronic
And
widespread pain is the hallmark of this disease because you have muscles all over your body. A lot of the joint pain is not from the joint itself, unless you have red swollen joints. It's from the small muscles around the joints that feels like the
okay.
pain's in the joint. You release the muscles, that pain goes away.
Okay, gotcha. And this person says, have you ever had a patient, you, Dr. Teitelbaum, ever had a patient try the VNS therapy for the vagus nerve? It's
Oh,
a
yeah. The vagal
prolonged.
nerve stimulators can be helpful, but I've gotten away from that just because it's one, it's difficult for people. And if you overdo it, um, if you do the exercises, because we haven't talked about the mind, body, spirit component, we talked about the
Yep.
physical. And what happens is part of the circuit breaker going off is you need to reset that circuit breaker. We've done that by restoring energy production, but the dynamic neural retraining system retrains the thought processes. And it actually, after 2 months of an hour a day, it's at 8 to 10 weeks, you'll feel those circuit breakers go back on, and you say, oh my God, I'm back, no pills. That's really nice. And so I like to treat all of it together, but
Yeah.
I will do that instead of, because what's happening with the vagal nerve, the autonomic system is off, and you have what's called the dorsal vagal. It kind of throws people, especially in people who are kind of flipped into almost being in possum, kind of shut down, hyper alert, vigilant, but numb state. They're in dorsal vagal tone. The vagal nerve stimulation can be helpful for that as concerned sound, because many of you, especially if you have old traumas, you know the expression "shake it off." That comes from somewhere. This is how mammals get rid of nervous energy. If an animal is chased by a wolf and barely escapes with its life, you'll see once it's safe, it will go through this kind of trembling thing, and that's how it releases the trauma of the situation. That's
Mm,
how humans do it too, except we feel stupid trembling, so we bury it and it never gets released. If you feel
right.
like you need to tremble, let it
Right.
happen when you're by yourself.
Yeah. So that area that you're just talking about, the mind body connection, that's what I do with people, and the emotional connection as well.
Mhm.
But that also brought up a couple of questions. So I know that a lot of us experienced, specifically with COVID. I don't remember if I experienced this
Mhm.
when I had MECFS so early on, but shaking, like internal shaking. It's
Mhm.
not. It's hard to describe. It's like tremors or trembling um,
Yep.
with just post COVID.
Yeah, and sometimes if we actually let it out and went to almost emotional collapse, you might let go of it. But
Yes, non-habitual movement is almost what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and an easier way and much more gracious is to do something called emotional freedom technique. It's a tapping
That's one of the things that
that
I.
can release the trauma. EMDR can release because there's four levels. There's the rational trauma, and talk therapy can help. It helps about 10% of the way. Not a big deal, but it's helpful to get the coping skills. Then you've got the emotional energy of the trauma, and the tapping EMDR can release that. You've got the muscle memory of the trauma, and that the trembling can release. And then you've got the negative thought patterns that build up, and the kind of hype and
Yep.
pushing us, and all these kind of thought patterns that keep your circuit breaker from resetting, and the dynamic neural retraining system can reset that. So these are all four of one piece, but they're kind of synergistic. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally makes sense. Yep, and like I said, that's where I specialize in those. So we also have another question in the chat. What about those of us with gastrointestinal problems like acid reflux? Which for the person in the chat, I had never experienced acid reflux before in my life,
Yeah,
and I had a couple of
that's,
times of experiencing that.
that's
So
part of the autonomic dysfunction. So,
ah,
because
sure.
again, things are not moving. When you put something in your mouth, can you imagine if you didn't have a current in that stream moving it downstream? It just sit there. And after sitting in your stomach for about an hour, what's happening is a lot of the food in the American diet has been so processed that it's not digestible. The digestive enzymes in the food have been destroyed. So it sits in your stomach, it's not digestible. And this we're going to start with the general public, then move specifically to long haulers. So it's not digestible. And after a while, your stomach says this isn't digestible. It hits the return to sender button. You get acid reflux, and off you go. So in general, uh, in relation to COVID, the PPI acid blockers like Nexium, Prilosec, those kind of things are deadly. They increase the risk of the COVID and COVID-related deaths and severe
Oh
disease
wow.
by 30%. On the other hand, the Pepsid, Zantac, which will be available again once they get rid of the impurities, Tagamet, and we've been using Tagamet as an immune booster for 30 years now. That family of H2 blockers actually is associated with marked and decreased mortality and may help the body flush any residual virus. So I would go with the Pepsid or Tagamet, and not the other acid blockers. But why are we seeing this more in fibromyalgia? Well, we talked about the autonomic dysfunction that sends your blood back, from your feet to your legs when you stand up. That system that also regulates the flow of the current downstream from your mouth and pushes things out the other end in a nice rhythmic current. That system is not working. Instead of being in a nice rhythmic all the way down, it's just kind of jumping and fluttering all over the place. And the valves at the bottom of the food pipe, which are supposed to be kept tight while food's in the stomach and relax when you're eating, and after it's gone, they just, and you'll see acid reflux will come back up a lot. So if it's in the food pipe, then smaller meals, um, things along those lines, but just the overall treatment helps out. If it's more in the solar plexus, then that's more gastritis from the food sitting there. And that things like licorice, marshmallow root, uh, taking plant-based, animal-based digestive enzymes do not work with crap. I'm sorry. Use only a plant-based digestive enzyme. Complete Just is one good one, but there's a whole host. As long as it says 100% vegetarian, you're good. Use that with meals, two with each meal. That can help considerably.
Okay, cool. What about, I'd like to touch also on hair loss that people are experiencing and on the loss of smell or even smelling things that are not around you.
Okay, so hair loss, a couple key things. One, if the iron is dropping or the thyroid is low from the disease, that will cause the hair loss. But the main things, it's called telogen effluvium is the name of it. And what that means is that any severe stress 3 months later can trigger the hair follicles to all cycle in the same time. So they all fall out together and you get this massive hair thinning. It's
Huh.
not dangerous. Once you've treated the underlying stress and problem, then about 9 months later, it goes back. There's a product called Hair Renew, which can be very helpful. But the key thing is to treat the underlying root cause because it can get even worse during the treatment because what you're seeing now reflects what was going on in your body 3 to 9 months ago. But
Wow. Okay.
telogen
Yeah.
effluvium is the main um, what's going on for most of you. Although low thyroid can be a close second.
Gotcha. Um, so, right. So we talked about brain fog a little bit. Uh, what I'm finding and what I experienced again earlier on, it wasn't as bad with the long COVID, but people getting to the place where they look at like a stapler and they can't even remember the word for
Yeah,
it. So is
difficulty
that
with word
still
finding.
considered to be brain fog?
Yes, difficulty with word
Okay.
finding, word substitution, short-term memory, and also about a third of people will have episodic disorientation. They do a turn in a supermarket aisle or driving the car, and they do a turn, and for about 30 seconds, they don't know where they are. They're not
Right.
going
Yeah.
to
Oh yeah.
crash or anything like that. They can still drive okay, but where am I? It's disconcerting. It's not dangerous. All of this goes away with treatment.
Okay, cool. And then we have a question. What are the baseline tests people should run to monitor progress or regression of their health and recovery from post-viral illness?
Well, the main thing is what's needed to determine what factors are playing a role in any given individual. In my book, From Fatigue to Fantastic, they're all listed out. There are too many for me to list right here, but just a
Right.
simple blood count and chemistry, like most doctors do, is grossly inadequate. It barely
Okay.
scratches the surface, and
So
those
go
tests
to the
are
book.
normal. Go to the
That's,
book. You
yeah.
want why really comprehensive hormone testing. We will consider immune and other infectious testing. We're going to look at B12 and iron levels. Those are the main nutrients that need to be checked for. We're going to check a SED rate. So testing along those lines. In terms of monitoring follow-up, mostly it's the thyroid of free T4 blood test. And other tests will depend on what we see, what we're treating, and what we see on the initial testing. Like, for example,
Right.
if they need testosterone or stimulating their own testosterone or bioidentical hormones, then we may be monitoring those, things like that.
Okay. Awesome. So what what is it that causes this thing of, okay, I have a week where I feel like things are getting better.
Mm.
And then, I mean, aside from the, post exertional malaise and whatever, but doing the same things for that
Yeah,
whole week as you usually do, things are getting better. Same week, doing the same things as the week before, and you have a crash.
they're
What's
just ups and downs, just like in any system. You're going to get normal fluctuations and variations, but that you have periods where you do feel better tells you that there's not anything permanently broken. And
that's cool.
and even if you don't have those periods, there's still not anything permanently broken with this disease.
Okay. Okay, great. So we do have a lot of people who are taking being prescribed steroids to help calm down the immune system for long haulers.
Here's,
Thoughts?
yeah. So the dexamethasone in the short term, the jury is still out, but I think it's certainly reasonable in severe cases. But again, given just for the short term for a couple of days. In terms of the long term, uh, because long haulers are a totally different process than what's going on in people that are hospitalized. To give it long term in the high dosing, the standard used is a big mistake because it will be very toxic and will counteract, will have bad effects on the immune system. But here's the thing, in very, very low dose, in other words, if you're giving prednisone, you know, 5 milligrams a day, that's not horrible. The dexamethasone, way too strong. I wouldn't even use that. But the 5 milligrams a day will suppress your own adrenal function. It should go to 2.5 milligrams or less, which is much lower than most doctors use because there's a difference between giving very low doses of the bioidentical adrenal hormone hydrocortisone, that steroid, to support adrenal function, than giving that very high doses of prednisone and dexamethasone that most doctors are using to suppress inflammation. This is not an inflammatory process unless your
Right.
SED rate is continuing to be elevated, which it probably will not be in most of the cases. Um, and again, so low dosing of the bioidentical, the equivalent of 1 to 2 milligrams of prednisone given as Cortef or hydrocortisone 5 to 10 milligrams can be very helpful. Doses over 20 milligrams of hydrocortisone or over 4 milligrams of prednisone will suppress adrenal function and they're not recommended unless clearly needed.
Okay. Awesome, awesome. So another thing that some people have been experiencing, and in fact, I've talked to one woman who her boyfriend didn't even have any COVID symptoms
Hmm?
at all. She's a long hauler, but he developed a really bad skin rash and burning
Mhm.
skin.
Mhm. Yeah. So again, 40 to 50% of people with the virus have no symptoms whatever. I would not presume that the rash that he had is from the virus, first of all.
Well, I
Uh,
have heard of several people, some of whom are long haulers who experience the skin burning.
yes, that's a
Okay,
different thing.
okay,
Okay.
okay,
In other words,
interesting.
I don't think long haulers is as common in those who have no symptoms whatever. And that 40 to 50% who get no symptoms, don't even know they have the bug, those aren't the one getting long haulers. It's the one who have symptoms, even if they're mild symptoms, that because the severity doesn't seem to impact unless you're getting post ICU, blah blah blah, different story. So um, that's more PTSD thing. But the what you'll see is we talked about the seven kinds of pain, and we talked about how um, you can get what's called allodynia, ALLODYNIA, where light touch hurts. Just a
Yeah,
gentle touch.
yeah,
You
you
can
mentioned.
barely have your clothes on sometimes. You know, there's only one or two shifts you can wear something that won't hurt, and that has to do with what's called an NMDA receptor being overstimulated. For those, actually, medications like ketamine, Namenda may help a little bit. Um, but I would start with the low dose naltrexone, and I would use topicals by compounding pharmacies. So that's the allodynia. That's a different thing, but you don't get the rash preceding it.
Okay.
That
It
he
must
had.
have been two different. I think it was two different things. I have heard of some long haulers developing rashes.
Yep, you can see the rashes, and you can see the painful on touch. But a rash that is painful, that makes me think more of a shingles or herpetic outbreak or something along those lines. I
Okay.
would not
Yeah,
presume that's part of the
I
long
think
haul.
I think I just mixed those up. If you have an elevated RA factor, should you begin meds treatment as suggested by some rheumatologists?
Well, the
Hydroxychloroquine.
well, first of all, hydroxychloroquine or Plaquenil, the research suggests, and again, I know this is a politically charged area. My politics are that a healthy society will be half supporting stability and half supporting growth. We call that conservative and liberal. To me, it's healthy that you have both, and that's my politics is that you need both. So I'm not on either side of the insanity we call politics out there right now. Um, but I wish the president had never mentioned Plaquenil or hydroxychloroquine because it is a very effective medication. And again, you looking at the media, you would be convinced, oh my God, this is deadly and useless. But that's not what the research is showing. What the research is showing is that the Plaquenil in the proper dosing, what they did is they said, well, okay, president said do studies. They said, okay, we'll do studies. Let's see. This dosing is safe and very effective. This dosing is toxic. We'll give this dose. And they're saying, see, it's toxic. But the studies using the proper dosing, which is the dosing I've been recommending from near day one, and which most people who came to it independently looked at data said this low dose works. These studies are showing that it's very effective at decreasing mortality and possibly even getting symptomatic COVID. But that's early in the symptoms. You want to start that in the first 2 days of being symptomatic. In the long haulers, I don't think you have persistent COVID. There's no reason to be using it.
Right, right.
You want to give the
Okay.
immune system the nutrients it needs to recover and rebalance. So there's not a purpose to giving antivirals when the viral's gone.
Gotcha. Yep. That makes sense. So we have this is a this is a tough question. So should we go to work with the pain, fatigue, and issues, gastrointestinal issues
See
we
how it
talked about?
feels. If it feels better to go to work, do so. If it feels better to stay home, do so. Because
Yeah.
your body, that your brain won't tell you. Your brain's going to give you the product of all the programming of what good boys and good girls are responsible should do. Your brain don't know jack. It don't know squat. It's just the programming that you've had as a kid and as an adult. Your feelings, how things feel to you, know what's authentic to you, and they are tying in all the information. So if you picture going to work and it feels like no, listen to your how do we be authentic? Remember, we talked about the gift, because your body is telling you what your feelings are telling you what you can and can't do, and your body is enforcing that. So if it feels like a bad idea to go to work, don't. You'll find
Yeah.
that if you can, and you're going to be homeless, not paying your rent and arrested if you don't do something, it'll usually feel good to do it, even though it seems annoying. So you go back to work when you feel it feels good to do so.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So we are coming on flu season here. You see in the media, get your flu shot, get your flu shot, get your
It's
flu
a
shot.
toss up. If you feel like it, get it. If not, don't. I don't bother with it.
Same, yep, same thing. Okay. Um, well, this is interesting. So some people who, and I experienced this as well before, some people are finding that when they usually used to get acupuncture treatments, now when they go in and they're a long hauler now and they get their acupuncture treatments, it seems to be backfiring. It's not a healing crisis.
Yeah, it's not strong enough for this process when people
Yeah.
are in the thick of it. It
Yep.
can be very helpful for more subtle and maybe deeply powerful in the long term changes, but in the short term, it's you look at you have the yoga thing on the wall behind you, and you've got it's there's levels of density and levels of where the things that are most subtle are most powerful, but sometimes only work when the system is ready to shift. It's the acupuncture is subtle but powerful, not really as effective as what's needed when people are in the middle of the quicksand of the long haulers.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that my experience of it was just that it it overloaded my my system. Um, but
The rest of the system isn't ready to move with the energy.
right. Yep. Yeah. So is there any information around people having pancreatic or liver issues?
Well, again, you know, if they had pancreatic issues, the main thing is that the pancreas is not making the enzymes needed for digestion. Also, the pancreatitis triggers free radical release, and that becomes self-sustaining. So if there's pancreatic pain in the solar plexus that's persistent with an elevated amylase level, I will give lipoic acid and other antioxidants. But the main thing I'll give are the plant-based digestive enzymes. So that takes care of digesting the food because the pancreas isn't, and the antioxidants settle down the pancreatitis. So for that, I would go with those two. For the liver, the question is what makes you think the liver is still up? Is it because the ALT and AST are elevated? Were they elevated before the virus? Which may have nothing to do with the virus. But the antioxidants in general, especially glutathione and maybe lipoic acid and even milk thistle, can help with the liver healing. I don't think that's a big thing for most people. The liver has remarkable regenerative capacities.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. There was a question that I saw up here earlier. I'm kind of skipping around to try to make sure we get. This was a very technical question, so I wanted to ask you about it. Um, Sorry, give me just a second here. Here we go. About the possibility of, now this is ENA. Yeah, ENA autoantibody fighting of virus. If ANA is negative, but ENA positive and immune did not respond to make specific antibody.
If the early nuclear antigen is elevated by itself and that's so great, I'm just not impressed with that being anything but just nothing.
Okay, okay, and along the same lines, I think there's some material right now about blood dysfunction in relation to long COVIDers.
That's a pretty broad area of saying there's something wrong with their body.
Oh yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Uh, yeah. So we've
You're going to
kind of
see
already.
you're going to see changes in viscosity. The hypercoagulation is a key part of the early phase where you see people having the strokes and rest. Fortunately, the research is showing that once people are out of the hospital, or past the initial thing, the risk of strokes is not, it's 1% or less. So it's not really much higher than, it's not a persistent problem. You'll see in fibromyalgia, there's increased clotting, which means a tendency to easy bruising and bleeding. That can be helpful to address that more in severe cases where we use blood thinners, but and more just the heparin. The other ones don't really seem to help. But again, by the time you're at this phase in the process, besides for the official, I wouldn't do anything with that.
Okay. Okay, great. So, wow, we have been over so many things today. And like I told you guys, I'm going to be breaking these down into bite-sized pieces. And
Can I answer
yeah,
one last question on the group
yeah.
chat? The question is, what is, in my humble opinion, no, humble may not be the word, but
Oh,
anyway,
there we
in
go.
my opinion, what's the proper dose of Plaquenil or hydroxychloroquine? The dose I'm recommending is 200 milligram tablets, two twice a day for the first day only, and then one twice a day for 5 days. So a total of 14 days. It needs to be taken with zinc, 50 milligrams a day. I would recommend the vitamin D, 5,000 to 10,000 units a day, and a multivitamin that has some vitamin C and vitamin K, especially even consider the higher dose C. But it's the 400 twice a day for 1 day only, or you're going to overdose, and then 200 milligrams twice a day for 5 days is a platinum dosing.
Amazing. Amazing. And thank you for the question too. And we did also have a question earlier on about how to turn the hypothalamus off,
Why
but
would you want to turn it off? But you need to turn it back on. It requires shine to restore energy production and the dynamic neural retraining system. Those two together, each individually can do it, but together it works best.
perfect. Perfect. So, you guys, thank you so much for being here, Dr. Teitelbaum. Amazing, amazing. So much information. Like I said, I'm gonna have everything kind of parceled out for you guys. And Dr. T, if you could give us your top three recommendations or places to start, just
Okay, go
takeaways.
get the book From Fatigue to Fantastic, or go to the website vitality101.com. Go to recoveryfactors.com and get the recovery factors. And I would go to endfatigue.com and get the energy revitalization system plus the smart energy system. Use the two together.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
yes, and thank you for all the good work that you're doing. And you know, I know that it gives me a lot of hope personally, and I know that it's giving everybody out there a lot of hope personally. And we're gonna reach a lot of people with this.
It's a
That's
labor of love. This is,
yeah.
please, all of you, let your friends know, let them know to let their friends know. I don't have a big corporate pharmaceutical budget. You know, each new drug has $70 million a year per drug that they use for it. I'm just some guy who's out there getting the information out to people. So um, I uh, appreciate very much you letting your friends know, and they can let their friends know. This is how people are going to learn about this, because there's no expensive anything here. This is just people helping people.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much, and you guys, hopefully see you soon. And Dr. T, again, thank you so much.